I remember the moment the instructors dropped us into the surf at 2 in the morning. The Pacific was black, loud, and angry, and every wave felt like it wanted to fold my body in half. The cold was a living thing, climbing into my bones, trying to convince me that quitting was the smart move. Men were shaking, teeth clattering, some whispering prayers, others cursing under their breath. You don't rise to the occasion in moments like that, you fall to your level of training. And that night, surrounded by chaos, exhaustion, and the unmistakable taste of fear, I learned the formula that would later become my 3 step attack plan. The same plan I still use today. The same plan I now teach to anyone who wants to achieve something that feels impossible. Let me validate the title immediately. I'm not here to motivate you. I'm here to give you the exact system that kept me alive in situations where failure wasn't just embarrassing, it was fatal. This 3 step attack plan didn't come from a book. It didn't come from a seminar. It came from being pushed past my breaking point again and again until I finally understood how the mind works under extreme pressure. And more importantly, how to override it. If you can understand this system, you can use it to lose weight, build a business, rebuild your life, improve your relationships, or gain discipline. It's universal because it's built around the way the human brain responds to threat, stress, and progress. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. You don't fail because you're weak. You fail because your brain flips into survival mode at the wrong time. When you start a new goal, whether it's hitting the gym, learning a skill, or changing your habits, your mind interprets discomfort as danger. That's when you get the urge to quit. That's when your excuses get loud. That's when the voice in your head says, "This is too much." I saw it in Hell Week all the time. A guy would look strong, confident, ready, but then the cold hit or the instructors added pressure, and suddenly he wasn't fighting the environment anymore. He was fighting his own brain. And once that happens, the battle is already lost. But here's the part that should give you hope. Your brain is programmable, it's trainable, it can learn to respond differently. According to a Harvard resilience study, humans are capable of rewiring their stress response faster than most people ever imagine, as long as they follow structured micro steps, not vague plans, not wishful thinking, actual steps, small but aggressive actions that teach your brain that discomfort isn't danger, it's instruction. That's exactly what my 3 step attack plan does. It rewires your mind to stop freezing when things get hard and start attacking instead. It teaches you to choose the mission over the emotion. It helps you break an overwhelming goal into pieces so small and tactical that quitting doesn't even cross your mind. When I was in the teams, we didn't approach a target by thinking about the entire mission. We locked onto one objective at a time, one door, one hallway, one movement. That's the same approach I'll teach you here. You need to understand something before we go any further. When people try to achieve big goals, they don't quit at 100%. They quit at 40%. That's where the brain throws everything it has at you: fear, rationalization, doubt. You think you're done, but you're actually nowhere near your limit. I watched men collapse in the surf and swear they had nothing left. Then an instructor would yell, "Get up!" And suddenly those same men would sprint like their lives depended on it. That's when I realized the truth. The body doesn't quit first, the mind does. This first chapter, the mission brief, is your reminder that the battle you're fighting isn't against the goal, it's against your instinct to retreat. And that's exactly why I built the attack plan. 3 steps: clear, aggressive, and simple enough to execute even when your mind is screaming at you to stop. If you stick with me, you're going to learn how to override your survival mode, how to break any goal into winnable targets, and how to strike with the same precision we used in the field. The chaos I faced in the Pacific taught me this system. Now I'm giving it to you. When I left the Navy and started coaching civilians, I noticed something immediately. People weren't failing because they lacked strength, intelligence, or even discipline. They were failing because their goals were foggy. They were vague. They were floating targets with no shape, no boundaries, and no clear point of impact. And when a target is vague, your brain does what every human brain is wired to do. It panics. It senses threat. It senses the unknown. That's when overwhelm hits. And overwhelm is the first step toward quitting. I watched incredibly capable people crumble under goals that were actually well within reach, simply because their brain couldn't lock onto anything solid. In the teams, we never stepped into a mission without a clear target, not once. If your objective is fuzzy, you die. It's that simple. Whether we were hitting a compound, clearing a structure, or executing reconnaissance, the first question was always the same: what's the target? Not what's the plan for the next week? Not what if something goes wrong? Just the target, the single point of impact. I carried that mindset into civilian life. and it's one of the most powerful tools I teach today. I call it the target lock, and once you understand it, your entire relationship with goals changes. Here's the problem. Most people don't set goals, they set fantasies. I want to get in shape. I want to make more money. I want to improve my life. Those are wishes, not missions. When your brain can't identify the exact thing you're aiming at, it fills the blank space with fear. Suddenly, the goal feels massive, impossibly large. You look at the whole picture and your mind screams, it's too much. That's why you quit early, not because it's hard, but because your goal was never defined tightly enough for your brain to process it as winnable. This is where target lock comes in. When you give your brain one clear, measurable point to focus on, everything slows down. The panic quiets. The mission becomes simple, not easy. Simple. One mission, one metric. That's the rule. If your goal is to lose weight, your metric might be 1 pound per week. If your goal is to save money, your metric might be $10 a day. If your goal is to build a business, your metric might be one outreach message every 24 hours. When I coach people, the moment they attach a single metric to their goal, I can see the tension leave their faces. It's like turning the lights on in a dark room. Suddenly, the path appears. The most common mistake I see is planning too far ahead. People want to map out 6 months, 1 year, 5 years. They want contingencies, backup plans, perfect timing. But that level of planning doesn't create clarity, it creates paralysis. I've watched people spend more time preparing than executing, and they convince themselves they're being productive. They aren't. They're hiding inside the illusion of planning because commitment feels dangerous. In the field, if we plan too far ahead, the mission fell apart. You plan enough to move, and then you move. That's the only way progress happens. Now, let me give you the secret trick I teach everyone, from CEOs to new recruits, the 90-second clarity drill. You sit down with a blank sheet of paper, you write your goal at the top, then you ask one question: what's the single measurable action that proves I'm moving toward this? And you have 90 seconds, no more, to define it. When you force your brain into a tight window, it doesn't have time to wander into fear. It doesn't have time to create imaginary obstacles. 90 seconds is enough to find clarity, but not enough to overthink. Japanese performance psychologists found that short burst decision making, under 2 minutes, reduces cognitive resistance by nearly half. Your brain stops arguing and it starts executing. Once you lock onto that one metric, everything becomes manageable. You're no longer trying to conquer the whole mountain. You're just taking the next step. And the moment your brain sees something as winnable, the mission begins. That's the power of the target lock. It anchors you. It narrows your focus. It gives your mind a target it can grab, aim at, and attack with confidence. Every big win in my life, on the battlefield and off, came from locking onto one mission at a time. Now it's your turn to do the same. When I teach people the second step of the attack plan, I always start with the same confession. I don't trust motivation, not in the field and not in civilian life. Motivation is a liar. It disappears the moment conditions turn against you, and it doesn't show up when you need it most. When people chase big goals, the first instinct is to attack with huge energy, massive workouts, massive business plans, massive changes overnight. That's the same instinct that gets people injured, burned out, or emotionally crushed. I watched it happen in Buddhist all the time. A guy would sprint out of the gate trying to prove he belonged there. Day 1, he was on fire. Day 2, he was still swinging. Day 3, he snapped. Too fast, too hard, too soon. Big bursts always collapse. Your brain hates uncertainty, but it hates exhaustion even more. When you launch into a goal with overwhelming force, you drain your mental battery faster than you realize. And once that battery hits empty, quitting feels like the only logical option. That's the fear I want to plant clearly at the front of this chapter. No one fails because they're incapable. They fail because they attack the goal like it's a single battle instead of a long campaign. The body collapses, the mind collapses, and the person walks away thinking, I guess I'm not cut out for this. That's not true. They were simply using the wrong strategy. Here's the hope. You don't need massive effort to make massive progress. You need micro advance, small, aggressive actions performed daily, the exact way we used to break down enemy positions. In the teams, when we cleared a compound or moved through dangerous terrain, we didn't rush. Rushing gets you killed. Instead, we took ground in small, deliberate advances. Each step was controlled, intentional, and steady. By the end of the operation, those little movements added up to complete domination of the environment. That's the same strategy I teach now. Progress made inch by inch, day by day, without burning yourself out. Most people make one fatal mistake. They wait for the right conditions. The perfect day, the perfect inspiration, the perfect energy. But perfection is just procrastination in disguise. Life never gives you ideal conditions, and if you're waiting for them, your goal is already dying. I tell my clients this all the time. If you're waiting to feel ready, you're already late. Micro advances don't depend on readiness, they depend on action, small, measurable actions that stack like bricks until the wall is built. The secret trick behind this step is something we used constantly in SEAL movement training, the 30-foot rule. When you're navigating dangerous terrain, night operations, uncertain landscapes, you don't focus on the entire route. You don't think 100 yards ahead. You narrow your world to the next 30 feet. That's all. You dominate the ground directly in front of you. Then you dominate the next 30 and the next. Before you know it, you've covered the entire distance without overwhelming your brain. I turned this into a civilian strategy. Whatever you're pursuing, fitness, business, discipline, learning a skill, you don't look at the whole journey. You focus on the next 30 feet of progress, the next tiny advance. The University of Copenhagen published a study that proves what I've seen my whole career. Micro progress increases habit adherence by 82%. That means when you make your actions smaller and easier to execute, you're 82% more likely to stick with the goal long term. Not because you become a different person, but because your brain stops fighting the process. It stops seeing the goal as a threat. It starts interpreting progress, no matter how small, as reinforcement. When you apply the micro advance principle, everything changes. A workout becomes 10 minutes of movement. A business goal becomes one email or one call. A writing habit becomes one paragraph. A financial goal becomes one tiny transfer into savings. Most people underestimate what those small daily aggressions can do. They think tiny means weak, but in the field, tiny meant lethal. Tiny meant safe. Tiny meant inevitable progress. When you combine precision with consistency, the results compound like interest. That's the real power here. You're not trying to win the war in a day. You're taking 30 feet, then another 30, and another. If you commit to that, burnout disappears, overwhelm disappears. The mission becomes a series of winnable advances. And once your brain believes the mission is winnable, you become unstoppable. The third step of the attack plan is the one that surprises people the most because it has nothing to do with power, motivation, or even discipline. It has everything to do with honesty, brutal, unforgiving honesty. I learned this the hard way in the field because in combat, if you don't evaluate what you're doing fast enough, you die. That sounds dramatic in civilian life, but the principle is exactly the same. People don't stall because the goal is too hard. They stall because they never stop to ask whether what they're doing is actually working. They grind for weeks, sometimes months, without checking the scoreboard. And when the results don't show up, they assume the mission is impossible or that they're not cut out for it. The truth is much simpler. No one is steering the ship. The engine is running, but no one is checking the course. This is the fear you need to understand clearly. Most civilians set a goal, start strong, and then coast blindly. They repeat the same actions day after day without verifying whether those actions move the needle. The gym goer lifts weights but never checks strength progression. The entrepreneur works 12-hour days but never measures revenue drivers. The dieter eats healthy but never tracks calories or changes in body composition. This creates a dangerous illusion of progress. You feel busy, but you're not getting anywhere. And the longer you drift, the harder it becomes to face the truth that you've been moving without direction. That's how momentum dies, not with failure, but with the slow, silent decay of unchecked effort. But here's the hope. There is a way to make progress feel almost automatic, and it comes from the same system we used in the teams: constant, rapid adjustment. Every mission we ran had one rule: adapt fast, strike again. You never wait a month to see if something works. You check immediately, you correct immediately, you attack immediately. That's the essence of the 72-hour feedback loop I teach now. Every 72 hours, you pause, review, and adjust. Not weekly, not monthly, every 3 days. It keeps your progress brutally honest and impossible to ignore. If something isn't working, you don't waste 6 weeks discovering the problem. You catch it within 72 hours and fix it before it destroys your momentum. Most people make the mistake of measuring results monthly. Monthly is far too slow. A month is enough time for small mistakes to become permanent habits. It's enough time for progress to stall without you noticing. It's enough time for you to drift so far off course that you lose belief in the mission. When I tell people to shorten their feedback loop, they often resist. They're afraid of seeing the truth, but the truth is liberating. The moment you face it, you regain control of the mission. The secret trick that holds the whole system together is something I borrowed straight from the field, the red-green report. It takes 10 seconds. You can do it anywhere, at any time. At the end of every day, you ask one question: was today red or green? Green means you made tangible progress toward your mission. Red means you didn't. There's no gray, no rationalizing, no excuses. The reason this works is because your brain hates seeing a streak of red. It triggers the same discomfort we felt when an instructor called out a failure during training. You want to correct it immediately. You want to get back on track. 10 seconds of honesty keeps your mission alive. According to behavioral economists, frequent micro check-ins dramatically increase follow-through because they create what's called immediate accountability. When you shorten the delay between action and evaluation, your brain connects effort with outcome much more powerfully. You stop drifting. You stop lying to yourself. You stop repeating mistakes for weeks without noticing. Instead, you operate the way elite operators do: tight feedback loops, fast corrections, constant re-engagement. When you combine the 72-hour feedback loop with the red-green report, something shifts inside you. Progress stops being mysterious. You always know where you stand. You always know what needs adjusting. And because you're constantly recalibrating, you never lose momentum. You become a moving force, always evaluating, always correcting, always attacking. This is the part of the plan most people overlook, but it's the one that keeps you sharp, consistent, and unstoppable. When people ask me what the hardest part of SEAL training was, they expect me to tell them about the cold, the sleep deprivation, the miles of running, or the endless hours in the ocean. But the truth is this: the hardest part was learning to fight my own mind. Every man who shows up to Buddhas already knows how to push himself physically. What breaks most trainees isn't their body, it's the moment their brain decides the suffering is too much. That moment usually arrives long before the body is anywhere near its limit. In the teams, we have a saying: when you think you're done, you're only at 40%. That's your false limit, and it's the most dangerous enemy you'll ever face. The fear you need to understand right away is this: your brain is designed to shut you down early, not to protect you, but to conserve energy. It's a survival mechanism from thousands of years ago, and it doesn't care about your fitness goals, business goals, or personal ambitions. It only cares about keeping you comfortable. So when you hit that wall, when you feel exhausted, overwhelmed, or mentally drained, that's not your body failing. That's your brain throwing an emergency brake you didn't ask for. I saw it every week in training. Big, strong men would collapse in the surf or fall behind on a run, convinced they had nothing left. But then an instructor would bark an order, or a teammate would yell their name, and suddenly they'd find 10 times more energy. That's when I understood the truth. The wall isn't real. The shutdown isn't real. It's a false alarm. Here's the hope: you can override that shutdown. You can train your mind not to panic at the 40% mark. You can teach your brain that discomfort is not danger, and you don't need to be a Navy SEAL to do it. The key is interrupting the shutdown sequence and replacing it with something controlled, deliberate, and repeatable. For me and for countless operators, that starts with a very specific breathing and command sequence. When you're under pressure, your breath collapses. It becomes shallow, frantic, and uncontrollable. That's what sends your nervous system into panic. But when you take over your breath, you take over the moment. My sequence is simple: one deep inhale, slow enough to feel the air expand your ribs. Hold for half a second, then a long, steady exhale like you're trying to fog up a mirror across the room. While you exhale, you pair it with a command: stand by, or set, or whatever phrase tells your mind that you're not done yet. Neuroscientists at Stanford discovered that the long exhale is what resets the autonomic nervous system and shifts you out of the fight or flight response. That first exhale is the pivot point where panic loses its power. But there's a mistake people make when they try to push through difficulty. They try to tough it out. They clench their teeth, tighten their muscles, and force themselves forward with raw emotion. That works for about 5 seconds, then it collapses. You don't defeat the 40% rule with tension. You defeat it with strategy. When you try to be tough, you burn energy faster. You shame yourself when you fall short, and you train your brain to associate challenge with failure. That's a losing cycle. To break that cycle, I use what I call the reset, refocus, reattack ritual. It takes 10 seconds, and it's saved me more times than I can count. Reset is the breath and command sequence. Interrupt the panic. Refocus is bringing your attention to the next micro step, not the whole mission. Reattack is the deliberate decision to move forward, even if the step is tiny. When you run this ritual, the false limit dissolves. You're no longer battling your own mind. You're overriding it, retraining it, teaching it that effort does not equal danger. I've used this ritual with CEOs, athletes, people recovering from failure, and people who have never pushed themselves physically in their entire lives. Every time, the change is instant. That wall they thought was real becomes movable. The fear they thought was physical reveals itself as nothing but mental static. And once you've broken through that 40% barrier even once, you start to realize something powerful. Your limits aren't fixed, they're negotiable. The SEAL mindset isn't about being fearless or invincible. It's about understanding the moment your mind starts lying to you and having the tools to fight back. Reset, refocus, reattack, 10 seconds. That's all it takes to reclaim control from the false limit and push into the territory where real progress begins. When I look back at the men I trained with, the ones who made it through Hell Week, the ones who made it to the teams, the ones who could perform under crushing pressure, there was one thing we all had in common. It wasn't talent, it wasn't strength, it wasn't even confidence, it was clarity. In the field, clarity is life, confusion is death. That same truth applies outside the military. Most people aren't struggling because they're incapable, they're struggling because they have no system. They drift from goal to goal, idea to idea, habit to habit, hoping something will click. And with no strategy, no structure, and no way to measure progress, they stay stuck for years, sometimes decades, without even realizing it. That's the fear I want you to feel for a moment. Drifting is the enemy. Directionless effort is the enemy. Waking up 10 years from now and realizing nothing changed, that's the enemy. The reason I created this three-step attack plan is because I saw too many people trying to fight their way through life without a map. And in the teams, we never stepped onto a battlefield without a map. Every mission had a simple structure. Every operator knew exactly what the next move was, what the objective was, and how we would measure success. The plan wasn't complicated, it didn't need to be. In fact, the simpler the plan, the more lethal it became. That's what I want you to understand. Simplicity wins, aggression wins, clarity wins. So let's tie this together. The first step, target lock, is your foundation. One mission, one metric. You define the exact thing you're aiming at and strip away the fog. You stop letting your brain invent 1,000 ways to fail because you've given it one clear point to focus on. That's how we approached missions. Laser focus on the objective. Nothing else mattered until the target was secured. The second step, micro advance, is how you move. Not with massive, dramatic surges of effort that burn you out, but with small, aggressive steps forward. Every day you take a piece of ground. Every day you advance by inches, and those inches stack like compound interest. That's how we cleared buildings, compounds, and terrain. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It didn't matter how big the mission was. What mattered was taking the next 30 feet. The third step, the battlefield feedback loop, is how you adapt. Every 72 hours, you check the scoreboard. You evaluate your actions. You correct what's not working and double down on what is. You don't drift. You don't hope. You don't assume. You operate like an elite unit that refuses to lose momentum. U.S. Naval Special Warfare documents emphasize this constant recalibration as one of the key reasons SEAL teams succeed under pressure. The mission evolves, and so must you. When you combine these three steps, target lock, micro advance, and the feedback loop, you get something incredibly powerful, a system that works for anything. I've used this plan with people trying to lose weight, build businesses, rebuild confidence, recover from failures, develop discipline, or simply break old habits. It works because it mirrors the way the brain responds to clarity, micro progress, and rapid recalibration. You're removing confusion, you're removing overwhelm, you're removing the slow decay of unchecked effort. Here's the hope I want you to walk away with. Your life doesn't change through dramatic transformations. It changes through controlled aggression, tiny advances, and constant course correction. It doesn't matter how many times you've failed before. It doesn't matter how far behind you feel. It doesn't matter how many false starts you've had. The moment you apply this plan, you stop drifting and start attacking. And when you attack with clarity, simplicity, and consistency, progress becomes inevitable. But I'm going to leave you with something important, something that sets up what comes next. There's one mental trap even SEALs struggle with, one hidden enemy that can sabotage every part of the system if you don't deal with it. It's the one thing that can make you abandon your target lock, ignore your micro advances, and forget your feedback loop. And if you don't eliminate it, this plan will fall apart no matter how strong your intentions are. We'll talk about that next.